We mentioned there was the Mu'tazila. This was a conceptual or philosophical school of thought that occupied the Muslim mind for around 2 centuries. There were discussions and debates, there were mental polarizations that seeped into the Muslim public because of this rationalist school of thought. This was the basic and the major and the central rational school of thought that the Muslims had. We spoke a little about how they emerged in the masajid at that time. We spoke about one of them who's considered to be their founder. His name was Wasil ibn Ata. And we will continue here to outline the characteristics and the features that set Al-Mu'tazila apart from the other Muslims. Al-Mu'tazila began towards the end of the Umayyad rule, and they continued throughout the time of the Abbasis. We can call it heyday. They peaked during the time of Al-Ma'mun, Al-Mu'tasim, and Al-Wathiq. These are 3 of the kings who ruled in Baghdad. Remember, I call them kings, don't call them khulafa. I don't think they were they qualify for that description. So what is it that makes Al-Mu'tazila a separate, so to speak, a separate or an independent body of Muslims? First of all, they did not agree with the concept of taqleed. You all know what taqleed is. Taqleed is when a Muslim, an average Muslim that is, the majority of Muslims in some areas, when they cannot themselves extract an informed opinion relying on the Quran, Allah's words, and the Prophet, and in some cases on the Imams, when they cannot do that, then they rely on a scholar to formulate a learned and a thought-out opinion on matters pertaining to different issues in life. Matters pertaining to rituals, matters pertaining to social responsibilities, matters pertaining to political ideas, and everything in between. So Al-Mu'tazila, they did not put much stock in a taqleed because they thought that this would take away from the potential of the thinking potential of the average Muslim. If you tell the average Muslim you have to rely on a certain person for your opinion, then that would make him mentally lazy. I'm just putting this. I'm trying to giving you the gist of what they are saying. Alaykum assalam. That will make them mentally lazy, and Muslims are not meant to be mentally lazy. We're meant to think. Remember, this is a school of thought that emphasizes very much the rational aspect of Islam and Muslims. So that's why they were very much against this concept of taqleed. But then they realized there are circumstances, there are individuals, there are conditions when some Muslims simply cannot develop enough reasoning, enough rationale, enough understanding, enough study and research. They simply can't do that. And in that case, as a matter of default, okay, you can have taqleed, but it's not supposed to be a matter of mainstream Islamic daily and social life. So this is one area that sets them apart from other Muslims. There are many scholars. Remember, this is a burst of intellectual activity, the first major burst of intellectual activity among the Muslims. Maybe we should also mention we're talking about here Islamic scholars, Islamic intellectuals, Islamic erudites who were located in what is called today Iraq, basically. A lot of them were in southern Iraq, Al-Basra area, Al-Kufa, Baghdad. So they came in contact with different trends of thought, different philosophies, different religions. And these different religions and philosophies and trends of thought and thoughts and concepts and ideologies, they had their own rationalization. And here we find Muslims who had to deal with people who had developed an argument for their own thoughts, be it right or wrong, they had an argument for it. So it wasn't these people figured. It's not expected Muslims who have Allah's guidance, Allah's book, Allah's prophet, if they encounter, let's say, a Zoroastrian or a Manichaean or a Christian or a Jew who were living in that area and they wanted to argue their points, not acceptable in their opinion to have a Muslim only state a few sentences or quote a few ayat and then believe that he has done his duty. It's his responsibility, if they are using their mind to express their ideas and philosophies, Muslims should also use their mind to express their ideas and develop their own philosophy. So this part of what went into this independent, rational school of thought was its geographical location. And during the course of these 2 centuries in which they occupied the Muslim public mind, there were many scholars who adhered to Al-Mu'tazila, or the I'tizali school of thought, rational or philosophical school of thought. Some of you may, when we say school of thought, you may think, oh, he's talking about fiqh. No, this has nothing to do with fiqh here. This has to do with questions and answers that become, as we will see, more philosophical than anything else. But just for you to be familiar with the 2 or 3 names, the founder of Al-I'tizal, his name was Wasil ibn Ata. So Wasil ibn Ata is considered a major figure in this context of I'tizal or Al-Mu'tazila. There was another person, his name was Wasil ibn Ata, was in Basra. Another person, scholar, erudite, intelligent person, his name was Ibrahim al-Nizam. Ibrahim ibn Sayyar al-Nizam. He was in Baghdad. He also developed his own rational paradigm to deal with the facts and reality of life around him. There's also a very well-known writer. His name, for short, he's known as Al-Jahidh. I don't know if you've heard of him. Al-Jahidh literally means, I don't know if you've seen, this probably has a medical term, some people, they have popped eyes. Their eyes come out like that. So Al-Jahidh, his name means that. Now, it may indicate that he had this condition, this medical condition, whatever it is called. He's known as Abu Uthman Amr Al-Jahidh. These are among the many other names. I didn't want to burden you just with names, but these stand out to be the major figures in this rational school of thought. Now it goes without saying, obviously we're talking about rational Muslims here who took to a philosophical bent in their understanding of Islam and in their explaining of Islam. it goes almost, it's redundant to say that they emphasized the mentalization of Islam, if we can put it that way. You mentalize Islam. You approach the meanings that are in the Quran and whatever is related to from the Prophet, you approach this with your mind, strictly. And that's the way they did, and as far as doctrine is concerned. They took Islamic doctrine in a mental and in a rational way. Of course, they relied first and foremost on the Quran. The Quran was the base, the Quran was the focus, the Quran was the reference. There's no doubt about that. It appears, though, that there, and this also, when you look at today's real world, it appears that they did not emphasize the hadith as much as they emphasized the Quran. Meaning that there was some hadiths that they had problems with. And they had problems because they were thinking through the meanings of the Quran, and then when they wanted to fit, as they developed this rational structure around the Quran, there are some hadiths they wanted to put within this rational structure, and they found that these types of hadiths simply did not fit in this rational structure. So they would just set that aside. And this, we find that other Muslims, from that time up until now, their interaction with the hadith, if they have a rational motivation or a rational impulse in them, that's what they do. They take the hadith, if it fits in the context of the Quran, it's absorbed therein. If it doesn't fit, then it is not worked in to their literature and into their books. This doesn't mean that they are against the hadith. Please don't misunderstand them. They are not. They accept the hadith. The problem is, as is the case with the body of hadiths, you have some hadiths that are authentic and true, and they came through reliable sources, and then you have other hadiths that are less than that. They are less than authentic, they are less than true, and sometimes they were narrated by unreliable characters, dubious personalities. So this would explain to us why they were very careful when it came to some hadiths. As we said, many of them were writers, many of them were scholars, many of them were philosophers. Many of them. And they had an advantage over their counterparts, because when we look at this history, we'll see that the Mu'tazila are standing on one side of the Islamic, let's say, intellectual structure, and then on the other side you had the fuqaha and muhaddithin, those we know as being the originators of the fiqh school of thought, and those who were compiling and narrating and writing the hadith. These were on the other side. And when we take a look at these two bodies of representatives and spokespersons and scholars of Islam, because they were all scholars, when we take a look at both of them and we begin to compare, we realize that the Mu'tazila were outspoken. They had a pool of vocabulary and words and thoughts that they could express themselves and their Islamic ideas much better than the fuqaha and the muhaddithin. If they were taking on the non-Islamic minds, the foreigners, the people who claim to be Muslims, the minorities who were not Muslims in Islamic countries, etc. All of this, there was a lot of fermentation, mental fermentation going on, and it needed qualities that could resonate with these others who come from a mental background. And they were much capable in doing this. Even their opponents would testify that they had outstanding